Alright, so the question on everybody's mind is how much did this build cost? Not including labor, because that's going to vary so much depending on where you're at. To start off, I think he said he paid $3,000 for that car as a roller. So let's get into the actual parts of everything, and I do want to start off by saying that this is not done as cheaply as possible. There are a lot of things that were not necessary, but they made it look better, or they made something just a little bit easier, so it could be done a lot cheaper. But that wasn't really the goal here. So when he dropped the car off, he did have a 5.3 and a turbo 350 and a drive shaft that didn't work. But aside from that, pretty much everything else I had to source. So I'll try to start kind of at the front and work my way back. Like I said, the 5.3 was supplied, so that's not a big deal. I needed an F-body oil pan and pickup. The pan was 110, the pickup was 60. You can find them a touch cheaper than that, but I mean, that's about average. Dirty Dingo mounts are 105. I really like them. First time I've used them, you can adjust that thing all over the place, which is convenient for this because whoever put the lower, like small block Chevy mounts in, they welded them offset a little bit, so it helped fix that. The Speed Engineering headers were 290. Throttle cable was 36. The LS harness, it was just like a cheap eBay one that was about 300 bucks. I thought that I was ordering a cut down one, but it turned out to just be like a China one. But the thing works surprisingly well. I'm not going to recommend it over like PSI or B&P or whatever the other one is. I'd definitely say go with one of those if you can, but like I said, I thought I was ordering a cut down one. And then the LS1 intake, again, this is something that's not necessary, but it looks a lot better than the truck intake. That was $226. The Texas Speed cam kit was about $650, and that's for springs, push rods, and a custom grind cam, so I don't think that's too bad of a price. The one for Goldie was like $430 or something like that. And then there's the Speed Engineering power steering pump and alternator bracket, that was $115. And then I did end up having to replace the power steering pump and the pulley. This one ended up breaking. You can kind of hear it in the last video, starting to die. After I turned the camera off, it was making horrible noises. And we tried to disassemble one from like stock brackets and stuff, and both times it broke the lips off the pulleys. So we ended up just biting the bullet and buying a new one. The pump was about 85 and the pulley was 20. A gate part number 20734. So 20734 is the lower radiator hose. That was 25 bucks. V-bands for the exhaust, 26 bucks. Cold air intake, 44 bucks. Oil pan gasket was 14. Flex plate bolts were 24 for the 6.0 flex plate that I used, which was 65 bucks. And then head gaskets, 46. Head bolts, 50. Intake bolts, 21. Again, this is some stuff that you wouldn't need if you were going to like just get a complete 5.3 and drop it in. Like, let's say you were building this Camaro again and you were trying to do it not super cheap, but as budget minded as you could. You could get like a complete 5.3 for, let's say, 500 bucks, like intake to oil pan. That would save you the 226 that I spent on the LS1 intake. That'd save you the 100 that I spent on injectors. You probably wouldn't need to replace the power steering pump and stuff like that, because I think the alternator bracket and the stock intake, I've seen pictures of people fitting those under the stock hoods, so you wouldn't need to replace it. That was something that I mostly did for aesthetics as far as this goes. You wouldn't need the head gaskets, head bolts, intake bolts, things like that. It would save you at least like 520 bucks. Moving on, like I said, head bolts, intake bolts, head gaskets. The radiator fan setup was 52 bucks. I don't really like these fans. They don't flow anywhere near what they were advertised at. Right now, keeping in mind that it's pretty chilly out, the car never, like, while moving and parked and idling and stuff, it never got over like 196. And I know that most LS's like to run like around 205, 210. At least that's what all mine have been. So I don't know how that'll be once it starts to get pretty hot here in the summer. So I think those would probably have to be upgraded. The fuel lines, I bulked all this together because there's 3/8 high pressure, 5/16 high pressure for the return. The Corvette filter, I think I lumped in this. No, the filter and regulator were 36. But the fuel lines and everything related to that, any adapters, that was all 93 bucks. Oil and filter, 25, trans fluid, 40. The U-joints came out to 80 for both of them. TR55 plugs are 25 bucks. Timing chain, 26. Dirty Dingo power steering pump adapters, 22 bucks. Like I said, the LS1 injectors were 100 off eBay. Just picked up some used ones. The 48.5-inch drive shaft, like I said, that was from PST, Precision Shaft Technologies. Just one of their pre-made ones that they sell on eBay. That was 168 bucks. The belt for this Speed Engineering like adapter in whatever is part number K060775, and that was 15 bucks. I think I got that on Amazon. Transmission dipstick, 20. For the headers, because I wanted to use as much of the stock exhaust system, so from like, here back is all like what came with the car when he dropped it off. So I got some 2.5-inch to 3-inch little like adapters that are like that long, and I welded the 3-inch end to the V-band that I welded to the header, and then the rest to the stock exhaust system, and that works fine. I got an AC block-off plate for 50 just to kind of clean the firewall up. Just an eBay, well actually it's an Amazon catch can, 28 bucks, and an Amazon like coolant expansion tank or overflow tank, that was 23 bucks. Oxygen sensors were 40. Again, something that you might not need if you get like a complete cutout. Water pump gasket, 7 bucks. Intake air temp sensors, 22. $12 for a speedo cable, $20 for new heater hoses, $16 for some transmission line, $30 for coolant, like I said, $100 for power steering pump. And $100 for HP tuners credits just to unlock the ECU, and I can tune it all myself. But that's, the tuning part would be put onto the labor, which like I said, we're not counting that. And then like you saw in the last couple videos, the transmission ended up needing to be rebuilt. And I never actually mentioned, I completely goofed and forgot to mention what was wrong with the transmission. So we never pulled the pan off it to look at anything. We just ripped it out of the car, took it to Ray, and like a day after I dropped it off, he started working on it, and he called me and he was like, "Hey man, I pulled the pan off this thing, and this thing is filled with grease." We don't actually know what it was, but it was like grease in its consistency and stuff. The thing seems to be working great. So to rebuild it was 400 bucks. I love Ray so much. The dude kills it on transmissions. Aside from all the crap with Goldie Hawn, because most of that was my fault, like with the shit transmissions and telling him like, oh, this doesn't matter, that doesn't matter. But when you actually just like, here, do your thing, total free reign, get it right, he kills it every time. So I just kind of wanted to point that out for anybody that was kind of skeptical about me taking things to Ray. So Ray's awesome. So the transmission rebuild is 400 and converter 200 bucks. So the total price for parts for this entire car, front to back, can't quite reach it, was $4,112 and some change. And I tried to keep track of every little thing, like even if it was a $7 water pump gasket, like super little minute things to keep it as precise as I can. One, just to show the owner of the car like, hey, this is everything that was done to it, and to try to make as detailed of a list for you guys that are thinking about LS swapping something as I can. So like I said, this could be done a lot cheaper if you didn't have to rebuild the transmission, didn't have to replace the power steering pump, didn't buy the brackets or the intake and stuff like that, and all the associated things of like the gaskets and whatever else, the intake bolts. You wouldn't have to buy head gaskets, things like that, even if you didn't swap the cam, because stock LSs make pretty good power right out of the gate. Like engine dyno test at like 350 horsepower. That's a lot. Like when you aren't used to something, or you're going from like a traditional small block, like a built small block, if you make 350 to 400 horsepower, you're like, fuck yeah, this thing rips, dude. A stock LS makes that. Stock, 350. It's not that bad, so you don't need a cam. I would say this thing's fun to drive, and it probably makes in the neighborhood of 400 horsepower at the crank. It has an open diff, which kind of sucks, because even like rolling into it at 30 miles an hour, it just spins that one wheel. So let's go through and try to think of like how cheaply we could actually do this. So I know for starters, you can get complete intake to oil pan 5.3s for 500 bucks with the harness ECU. Most of like from the exhaust manifolds, they'll go like half a foot or so and cut it. That way you still have the oxygen sensors and everything. I know you can get those for 500 bucks because I've done it. Actually, I think I paid 600 bucks for the one that's in James Brown, and that was complete as can be. So we know that that could be, I put 400 here, but we know that that can be done for 500 bucks. So there's 5. And then let's say we're trying to replicate this. We got another turbo 350. It'll be the same setup for the flex plate and all that shit, right? So that's 65 plus what I say, 22 or 20 something for the bolts, flex plate bolts, 24 bucks. So that's 89, we'll just call that 90 bucks, right? We're at 700 bucks to get that in there, and then 800 bucks for the mounts. I mean, like the total, I'm trying to keep track of the running total. So we're at 800 bucks and we have it mounted in there, bolted to the transmission. Theoretically, we're still using the stock cross member, so everything's bolted in. You could be using the factory exhaust manifolds. The stock ones flow really well. That's why a lot of the turbo guys like them too. And then you have all your accessories bolted up, stock belt. You don't have to buy anything there. You could get a cold air intake. That's 44 bucks. Stock radiator, stock truck upper hose. Like they'll probably have that, I would expect. If not, what, 15 bucks? And then I think I said 20 bucks for the lower. So let's say 900 bucks, right, for the intake and assuming both hoses. So we're at 900 bucks there, 170 for the drive shaft rounding up. Well, let's say 250 for the drive shaft and U-joints, right? So that puts us at 1150. What else do we need? You'll have to connect it to the exhaust system. 40 bucks for materials, assuming you can weld it yourself. Even if you have just a little flux core welder, you could make that yourself. So we're at 1,200 bucks now in parts and everything. If you wanted to connect it to the stock power steering shit, you need that $20 adapter. So we're at 1,220. You'd have the wiring harness if you wanted to cut that down yourself. I think that takes like 30 or 40 bucks in like little parts and fuse blocks and stuff like that, little crimpers, whatever. So we're 1,300 bucks. We'll round up a little bit. Let's just get the tune out of the way because most of you guys don't have HP tuners. So most places I've talked to are around 500 or 600 bucks for a tune. So we'll just say you're at 2,000 now. And to be honest, I think that's just about everything that you would need, right? We got the engine bolted in, bolted the transmission, all that's good. And then like spark plugs and oils and fluids and stuff like that. I think realistically, just to LS swap it, you could do it for 2,300 bucks. Again, that's including the price of taking the car to someone and getting tuned. If you could tune it yourself, closer to like 1,500 bucks. And the good thing about doing it that way versus like this is you can do it in stages. So like you could swap it, odds are like if you're going from this one, which I think was a 305 car, if I'm correct, odds are it was a 305 being like an 80s Camaro and not a Z28. Even then, if it was a Z28, those made like what, 180 horsepower. So going from that to basically doubling the horsepower, you'll notice that. Like you'll definitely notice that. And then you could do the rest in stages. You could headers, intake, cam. You could do a bunch of stuff and like enjoy it in stages to where like most of us, once you've had a vehicle at a certain power level, you really start to get used to it. And then you're like, man, I wish I could turn this up. So it'll be a whole lot easier to turn up a stock setup than it would be to turn up something like this. Because this, it's kind of at the point where it would need like nitrous or turbos or better head or a supercharger or something. I hope I'm getting my point across. I don't know if I actually am. What I'm trying to say is there's nothing wrong with doing just a bone stock swap into something. But I definitely see the appeal of like, while the engine's out, let's already do all this work to it. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this little like build series on LS swapping this Camaro. He's gonna come pick up the car either today or tomorrow. So there isn't gonna be a bunch of like driving footage with it. He really wants the car back. He's super excited, and I've done pretty much everything that I need to do to it. Plus, the tracks aren't even gonna open here for another 5 weeks, so I don't think he'd like me just holding on to his car for that long. Maybe once they do open, I'll be able to talk him into bringing it out and we can see what it does. If I had to guess, I would say probably high 13s, like a 13.8 or a 13.9. Well, maybe not, because with it being an open diff and everything, it probably low 14s. Low 14s to high 13s, I think, is probably where it would be. It's got power up top, but I think traction limited, plus these wheels. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the videos with it. Unfortunately, I think it's going to come to an end. So that just means we'll be able to move on to something else, like James Brown here or Goldie Hawn. I need to order the parts for Goldie Hawn pretty soon because, like I said, there's just 5 weeks left until the track, and I haven't started on that thing at all. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching. Thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. I'll see you next time.